I have a short time for presentation, so I will not spend time to acknowledgements, but I have to tell that I am very glad to be here with you. You will see in my presentation it is a little bit longer because I and my colleague Dudás, we decided to make one kind of summary which could be useful for all of you, but especially for students. So I hope they will get our presentation because we stress the most important theoretical and other aspects about employment contracts, generally about collective agreements, about contract law, etc. I will not explain that. I would like to tell something about labor law. It is very important branch of any legal system, but I think that I could tell that that our state does not always get necessary attention to labor law. We have a lot of new things to regulate, but it is far from discussing, not to be regulated. So I think it is very important for Serbia legislator to concentrate to labor law and social security law, as Luca also said. We really don't have a lot of time, so I will not speak about every slide. What I would like to tell about employment contract, of course, that it is central category of labor law, and I think I should tell that it is the basis of establishing of labor relationship, but it is not the only one, and I think it is not a good solution that we don't have a list of other types of people who works like in Poland, as I saw. So I adapted my presentation to what I see in the presentation of my colleagues. So we don't have such a list of workers who should be covered by labor law or employment contract, but we have one good order in our labor code where are all workers like civil servants have some kind of protection by labor code. So some of workers, civil servants and other categories have the core protection, I think, which is very important for be regulated by labor law. These are some theoretical aspects, and I will not expose them, but you can compare with your system, it is good, and you can see some basically important kind. For example, I would like to stress the cause of labor relationship. It must be sufficiently defined, and it must be, I could stress, in this period after COVID and in this more modern period when we have not a lot of not regulated kinds of work as platform work, that it should be legally and morally permissible. Morally permissible. I could tell the first. So the regulation in Serbia. It is interesting that we do not have a notion of employment. It is really outdated, I could tell, state. So I must tell that I think that our labor law is a little bit outdated, especially because new forms of work are far from to be regulated. And I think it is a problem because legislator doesn't have any idea to think about that. So I think it will be a great problem in the future and also for the courts. What I would like also to stress, formal requirements for employment contracts I think we have a good solution that it must be done in writing. So there is one presumption of entering to employment relationship if a verbal agreement is concluded. And when we speak about that, we also have to speak about other kinds of labor contracts, which are now, I think, flexible. We call that flexible work contracts. Also, we have the same problem. False flexible work is not clearly and precisely regulated by labor code. So we have problems with our courts how to decide is it flexible work contract or labor contract or not, and we need sometimes years to distinguish some kind of false flexible working contract from labor relationship. Our highest court sometimes doesn't notice this distinction. So another problem which I saw in colleagues' presentation, also self-employed. They are also not covered, regulated by labor law. There is not made distinction. And interesting is that in 2019, state made one kind of distinction, but it was in tax law. So you have one kind, I forgot, maybe 15 characteristics, which if somebody has 7 or 8, it is employee. If he doesn't have some enough characteristic, it is not employee. But it is strange that it is regulated by tax law, not by labor law, and my colleagues cannot understand why it happens outside of labor law. So I spent half of my presentation time. So it is not easy to cover individual employment contracts and collective labor contracts, which are very, very wide topics. But it was a good idea to connect contracts, such a kind of contracts. I think Nora made a very good job when she connected those contracts, because it is connection exactly with the obligation law. And outside of employment framework, it is contract. And sometimes we forget that those rules should be also respected, and sometimes colleagues from labor law don't know enough obligation law. So we should take more time to research obligation law. When we speak about collective agreements, again, theoretical rules, but I would not like to stress that. I would tell, for example, this is all theoretical, so you can read that. What is interesting, that a collective agreement is somewhere between the legal act and contract, and it is very atypical. So, as one theoretical said, it is at the crossroad between public and private law. And also, one of my colleagues said that they has body of contract but a soul of law, and it is very atypical. There are not such contracts anywhere, only in labor law. So we can be proud because we have something specific like that. So what I would like to tell something about collective agreements in our law. Those things which you can read are, I could tell, typical for each country. What can be interesting, that we have this special agreement if there is no collective agreement. So it could be concluded by employees' council or by workers. And if there is no collective agreement, it can regulate wages and some or other elements about wages of employees. So I think it is something original. Types of collective agreements are also typical, I think. Exactly, we don't have national collective agreement, and I think it is a problem. Because we should have it, especially in those circumstances. There was one questioner, what happened in the collective bargaining of Serbia during COVID? Nothing. Trade unions were completely slapped, frightened. They didn't try to protect people, even if we had a lot of workers' rights which were not protected. It was completely, I could add, contrary to the legal state rules or rules of the law, the state during the COVID. And collective agreements were completely invisible in that sense. So, what I would like to tell also, I think this is a good point of our law, that collective agreements is considered to be a source of law by legal force immediately after the law or by laws, and it has a priority over labor rule book or working rules, how you can call them. And I think it is very, very good solution. But the problem is, as colleague from Romania said, the coverage. Coverage is very modest. We could tell that we have a lot of collective agreements only in public sector, where we have strong trade unions, but in private sector, trade unions are very, very, they are not strong. They are not enough strong to protect workers. There is not enough collective agreements. Also, personal scope or application, I think is also a good point of our labor code. All employees are covered by collective agreements, even if they are not members of trade unions. But I think it is not original any regulation. It is typical for all the countries. But also for employers, it is good that collective agreements applies to all employees who were members or become members of association. So it is clearly regulated. It can be sometimes problem in practice. And we also have extension of collective agreement. You know what is that, but student maybe not. There is a possibility to extend the coverage of collective agreement, which is also a good solution. And we have few types of labor dispute settling. I could stress this informal state mediation, which often workers often ask politicians to intervene. It's not regulated, but it is very famous. It is showing exactly the system of industrial relationships is not working properly, and that regulations is not enough strong to protect the employees, and that it should be changed. So thank you. My 14 minutes expired.
Let me start by saying that I will try to be an objective discussant, but you have to know that we are good colleagues and friends with Senad for a long time ago, and we are cooperating in some ILO projects as well, so it will be difficult for me to be totally independent and impartial, but I will try to be. If I look at the paper, it's very interesting to see that as Senad said, it's a very good overall description for students about the whole structure of Serbian labor law. It has a very clear, transparent structure with 3 chapters, individual, collective labor law, and some analytical issues. And what I really liked in the paper is the very good balance between the historical approach and also the contemporary reflections on topical issues of labor law. And I also liked the balance between the descriptive and the analytical part. So this is a very good and paper and easy to read. When I was reading the first pages of this report, it was just like reading about Hungary or about the whole Central and Eastern European region. And let me mention 3 things. And I would like to contrast these 3 typical features of Serbian, Hungarian, and Central and Eastern European labor law with some international tendencies. The first one, as Senad said, that the main goal of labor law in our region and in Serbia as well, marketization, liberalization, flexibilization, we have these buzzwords for labor law. But on the other hand, we have to see the international tendencies. Let me just quote the ILO's centenary declaration from 2019, which says that we need a human-centered approach to labor law. We are very far from that. The second point, what Senad also quoted during the speech, that there is not enough attention from the state on labor law. Again, I don't want to go into politics, and it's not only about politics, but in Hungary we don't have a Ministry of Labor. As Sarah said, we don't have an independent labor court. We don't have a separate labor inspection body. So the institutions of work are kind of invisible. And it's not only typical for Hungary, and it's not a matter of politics, but a general tendency in the region that the state is not paying enough attention for labor law matters in general. And again, let me quote the international tendencies, because you all know that we have the European Pillar of Social Rights in the EU, which is positioning in a different position of social policy and labor law, so we have to keep an eye on that development as well. The last point in this general context, the paper is writing about the non-enforcement and the circumvention of labor law in practice. This is, again, a huge problem, even if we have good formal regulations of labor law, and it was very much confirmed by an ETUI, European Trade Union Institute research recently, that access to justice in our region is totally lacking in terms of labor law. And this is a general problem not only for Serbia, not only for Hungary, but the whole region. Let me just continue by some random and piecemeal dilemmas and questions about the paper. If we are talking about employment contract law and individual employment contract, it was raised by many speakers that this is the cornerstone or the founding principle of labor law, that we have the employment contract as such. But question arises again that how relevant and how sustainable is this in our times? And let me again refer back to the centenary declaration of the ILO, what I mentioned before from 2019. I think it's a very important contemporary policy document about the future of labor law, which talks about universal labor guarantees. So maybe to some extent we have to forget about the employment relationship, sorry for saying that, and we have to look beyond. And also, you all know the name of Mark Friedland, who is writing about the personal employment contract. So I have the feeling that we have to look for creative ways to distantiate ourselves a little bit from the traditional, formal, rigid understanding of the employment contract. I think it's a matter of discussion. When we come to the collective part of the report and the paper, it's very sad to say like this, that in the former kingdom of Yugoslavia, you had a very good tradition of collective bargaining. If I know, you quoted some laws from the 1920s. You have quite a big tradition of collective bargaining, but nowadays it's very difficult to promote collective bargaining in the region. I had the pleasure, not only the pleasure, to be honest, to cooperate with the ILO in a project about promotion of collective bargaining in the Western Balkan region. And in one word, it's a huge challenge. So it's very difficult, also in Hungary, but it's a problem. Let me just quote some very nice expressions, what I really liked in the paper from the text. Senad also mentioned legal chameleons for the description of collective bargaining agreements between private and public law. I don't want to make jokes, but in Hungary we have another animal what we associate with collective bargaining parrots, because we have these parrot clauses in collective agreements only repeating the words of the law. So the whole message is that even if we have these animals, word animals in collective bargaining, it's getting meaningless in our region. Also a nice expression, they call collective bargaining as a negotiating machinery. Again, the main question is how to energize, how to trigger this machinery, and what is the role of the state to promote collective bargaining. It's an international legal obligation to promote collective bargaining, and we have to look for alternative ways to promote collective bargaining, like making connection with public procurement law, environmental law, and many other things. It's for the future, but it's very interesting also. Let me mention two concrete legal institutions. Senad was talking about so-called association agreements. If I understand well, these association agreements are a tool to gain representativity for two or more trade unions to fulfill the criteria for representativeness. I think it will be very important for us in Hungary as well, because in Hungary we have this 10% representativity rule, but it often happens that there are two trade unions with 8 or 9 or 6% of representativity, and they cannot conclude an association agreement to conclude a collective agreement. So it is something to learn from Serbia. Maybe it's an innovative legal institution. Another interesting legal institution is, how was it called? I'm sorry, I have to look in the text. Agreement for wages. Which is a possibility for elected representatives like works councils and other employee representatives to conclude a legally binding agreement with the employer if there is no trade union, if there is no collective agreement. And it is very interesting to see that in Serbia you can only agree on wages. But in Hungary we have totally the opposite regulation, because there is this possibility, but the works council can agree on all types of flexibilization of labor law, but not on wages. So it's totally different, and it's very interesting to compare these two legal institutions. Let me just close by some rhetorical questions or for some food for discussion. I really like the part about the COVID-19 situation, and it was very interesting to see that, if I understood well again, according to Serbian labor law, there was an obligation for employers to prepare a so-called implementation plan or risk assessment, which is, to me, it's a model of regulated self-regulation, so how employers could plan their tasks during the COVID-19, and I would be very interested how did it work in practice. Another point what I would like to really raise, and I'm finishing, that I really liked in the paper and in most of the papers, that there are many cross quotations to Slovakian, Croatian, Slovenian labor law, and I think we have a lot to learn from this community, because I think that we don't really have that in the Visegrad countries. So what I see in the Western Balkan, as I said, I'm involved in some project in the Western Balkan, that they are learning from each other, and we don't do that quite often. So that's why these events like this are very important, because we have to look for peer learning and mutual learning. And the last point, if we will have time for discussion, it would be very interesting to see that how the kind of slowing down and unpredictable process of accession to the European Union for the Serbia and for the Western Balkan countries in general is affecting the development of labor law, because as we saw like 5-10 years ago when this accession procedure has started, there was kind of a hooray atmosphere about changing labor laws and making it more developed. But I have the feeling that this is slowing down, and there is this unpredictability partly connected to this European development. So these are my main thoughts about the paper, and congratulations again.